Never mind its name. Another is derived from estrogen. Never mind its name. So, here's the area right here where heterosexual men respond to the compound produced by females. And the domino here hides a third area, which is shown just a little bit in this black rectangle sticking out to the right underneath the domino. And the point is that homosexual men respond to these compounds like women. 2 years after this, they did the same study with lesbians and found the same corresponding effect. Lesbian women respond in their brain when they are smelling these compounds like men, not women. Now the rope represents the church with this statement. The church does not have a position on the causes of any of these susceptibilities or inflammations. Sorry, I left out the S. Including those related to same-gender attraction. Those are scientific questions, whether nature or nurture. Those are things the church doesn't have a position on. I don't think I have tried to hide my conclusion about what all of these things mean. It isn't nurture, it's nature. How strong then? How much do we really know? Well, I want to use a comparison. This is what we know about what you have to do if you want to make a steroid. You start with that thing and you turn it to that, to that, to that, to that, and finally you get cholesterol. Now, that disguises the complexity. If you want to make cholesterol, start with that, go to there, and then to that, and then to that. And when you've got that, you go to there, and there to there, and then you've got the squalene, and then with a flick of the wrist, you turn the squalene into cholesterol. That's not hypothetical. That's not speculative. That's the truth. That's the way we make cholesterol. Nobody studies this anymore. It's a done deal. This is personal to me. This is Conrad Bloch. He won the Nobel Prize for figuring all that out. I'm quite willing to give him the Nobel Prize for figuring all of that out. It's an intellectual and an experimental tour de force. And I have great regard for this good German immigrant. I'm tempted to say something about another subject, but I'll hold my peace. And I got my chance professionally in this man's lab. I was allowed to go in as an undergraduate who didn't know diddly squat and work with a postdoctoral fellow who taught me how to humanely sacrifice a rat, take out its liver, homogenize the liver, make plates for thin layer chromatography to separate the lipids on a plate, how to run the radioactive measuring scintillation counter. So that's the cholesterol pathway. What's the homosexuality pathway? It's clear that what we don't know exceeds what we know by a big margin. There isn't anything about the mechanism of sexual orientation that approaches the biochemical certainty of the cholesterol pathway. But I don't think that's the question to ask now. The question to ask is, do we have enough evidence at this point of our ignorance to say whether or not such a pathway exists? My answer is clearly yes. Those who don't like to accept a biological explanation for sexual orientation try to use psychological or social explanations. The oldest one are Freudian in origin. Anomalies in child rearing are invoked. The most common is that a man is gay because his father was distant or abusive. To compensate, mom became overbearing and overprotective. The thing about those psychoanalytical explanations is that they're not subject to empirical testing. And attempts that have tried to measure this have always failed. It's quite true that a number of gay men recalling their childhood remember some kinds of tensions between themselves and their father. I think the more likely explanation is that rather than be causative for homosexuality, this distance, this emotional distance, is reflective of a homosexual orientation. And the disappointment that some fathers may feel that their sons choose not to engage in the kind of man-like activities that Dad was always expecting to happen. Likewise, people have invoked learning theories, have suggested that sexual abuse in childhood is responsible. With respect to women, back to Freud for just a minute. Freud had this worked out for men and said almost nothing about homosexuality in women. Although at the end of the day, in writing a famous letter to a woman, he said something important, which is, regardless of the truth of my hypothetical explanations, she wanted to know if he could help her change her homosexual son. And he said, changing this is not likely to happen. Back to sexual abuse as a putative explanation. I understand that there are data to suggest that 1/3 of women in this country have been sexually abused to some extent in childhood or adolescence. I find that so despicable and so unbelievable and so disgraceful but the evidence seems to be that, for example, there are large numbers of lesbian women who've been abused, but probably no more than heterosexual women. And in the studies that I know about, most of these women, in recalling their childhood experience, said,